Well, good morning, Watershed. It's Sunday morning, and it is Father's Day. This is Matt O'Neill. I am Matt O'Neill. I am Matt O'Neill, and I am one of the co-pastors here. And I'm with a ragtag bunch here on stage: Jay, Austin, and Brady. And do you guys have a name for your three-person band this morning? What is it?
You just asked a second ago, and Brady came up with a great name. We are the Metaphysical and the Membranes.
The Metaphysical and the Membranes. So, and apparently you are the metaphysical, and these two are the membranes. So I have no idea what to do with any of that. We're so excited that you're here this morning. Go ahead and start to just kind of give a shout out where you're logging in from this morning. Hopefully, a lot of dads watching today, a lot of sons watching today. This morning's conversation, I'm really excited about for a couple of different reasons. One is that the way that we're going to posture the conversation from two different perspectives this morning, and I'll say more about that in a few moments. But then also, there's quite a few voices that are speaking into today's rendition of Cabin Fever Church. And so go ahead and just kind of give a shout out where you're logging in from. Say hello to friends that you're noticing pop up. Go ahead and grab your coffee and your waffle or whatever it is you need, the thing that you enjoy imbibing in as we get rolling towards this morning. When we're just we're really glad you're here. We're glad. Thanks.
Good morning. I was thinking about, what kind of music could we connect to this Father's Day? And everything that's going on. I'll admit this is a weird Father's Day with everything that's happening, all the isolation and ways in which we are kind of unable to connect to one another. And so maybe this Father's Day holds a lot of different things. Maybe there's some pieces of it that are celebratory, and you're celebrating maybe being a father or celebrating your father. And maybe for some, there is some pain. Maybe this is the first Father's Day that you have lost your father. Maybe in the midst of everything that's going on, there's been some estrangement with a father or a father figure. And so this morning we want to create space for all of that. And we're going to sing a song that kind of speaks to something that we say here a lot at Watershed. It says that you're born good. You were born whole. You're born complete. And then along the way, things happen that cause us to see incompleteness. And so as I think about myself being a father and the ways in which I want to communicate to my kids who they are, there's this part of me that wants to give them the knowledge and the experience that they are wholly good and that they're wholly loved. And so we're going to sing a few songs, and we're going to engage in some conversation this morning. Excited for you to be here today.
You're ready, born
you only knew, the forest grew a little greener, the roots reach in a little deeper, the birds all sing a little sweeter, all to welcome you. I wanna see you're happily ever after, that you know in your heart that you matter, that you were royalty. This is your kingdom, this is your crown, this is your story. This is your moment, don't look down. You're ready, born ready, and all you gotta do is put one foot in front of you. I'm sealing is your floor, and all you gotta do is put one foot in front of you. You're ready, born ready. All you gotta do is put one foot in front of you. I see it is your floor, and all you gotta do is put one foot in front of you. If you only knew. This is your kingdom, this is your crown, this is your story. This is your moment, don't look down. This is your kingdom, this is your crown, this is your story. This is your moment, don't look down.
So I don't know if we've ever had a Father's Day like the Father's Day that we're trying to put together this morning for you. And by and large, what we're hoping to do is to create a conversation, a way of trying to envision or visioneer maybe what fatherhood could look like. And so this is going to include several different voices, my own for sure, but then also one of Watershed's, who I would like to say is one of Watershed's favorite sons these days, Thomas Garvin. And then also a poet, an author by the name, or a poet, artist rather, by the name of Lauren Fletcher, who's a part of this Watershed community, are gonna help us have this. And so again, I think this is going to be this is really different, and I think it's going to be just really powerful. Before we head into our conversation, though, can I just mention a few things that might be helpful? For instance, if you're brand new and you're trying to figure out what does it mean to start to have traction here, we're continuing to launch different environments that would allow a person through technology to connect, begin to get to know folks. But sort of the first step towards getting connected here these days, if you're new, is something called Shed 101. And every month or every 4 weeks or so, it's at 7 p.m. on a Monday night. We invite anyone that's brand new to meet with Scott and I. And that way we get to hear a little bit how you're moving into this space. And these days, when we say space, that's more than just a physical space. That's a relational space. That's a spiritual space. And a space that's virtual, actually. And so would love to have you sign up for the next Shed 101. That is a week from tomorrow night on the 29th, Monday the 29th. And that's always been a really good experience so far during this pandemic season that we're in. and would love to have you be a part of that. Also, if you're wanting to have like a part 2 or an extended conversation around what we're going to be talking about this morning, then this Tuesday night, Thomas and I and a whole bunch of other folks are going to be kind of locking arms and talking more about, all right, let's take this a little deeper in terms of what fatherhood can mean. And this Tuesday night is special because in the history of Watershed, I don't know that we've had the availability to launch into a conversation about fatherhood in such a collective measure. And through technology, we're going to be able to do this. And so if you are a son, an adult son, or a dad, we would love for you to join us this Tuesday night at 7 p.m. You can sign up for Shed 101. You can sign up for this Tuesday night's Q&A in the comment section through the links provided. Also, if you go to our webpage in the Cabin Fever drop-down menu, there's a way to sign up there as well. I really hope that we have a ton of dads and sons show up this Tuesday night. I think we need this right now. Just in what's going on in the world, in all that men are facing right now, this is kind of a providential moment for us to come together as a community. And so I hope you'll join Tommy and me and our staff as a part of that. And then also, I just want to remind those of you who have teenagers that tonight there is the next rendition of Student Ministries online. It's a virtual game night, and David sends emails out for that. But if you want to email David at watershed.charlotte.com, if you have a senior high or junior high student that you'd like to get included in that, then you can email him and he'll make sure you get the information for tonight. And then I think Tuesday night also there's some sort of viewing party that's been happening and ongoing. So those are two ways for students to get. No, that's not happening, David. David's right here, and he says, nope, not this Tuesday night. Let's rewind the tape. Only this Sunday night. And then also this past Friday, I know we were able to participate as a church in the Freedom March uptown to commemorate and celebrate Juneteenth. And then the next opportunity to be a part of some type of protest or virtual type protest. It's actually a virtual protest, and that's through the YWCA and Pam Watson. I think the email should be in the slide or in the comment section. But if you want to know more about that, you can email Pam, or you can actually go to our website again, Cabin Fever Church. There's a link that gives you all the instructions. But essentially, it's a virtual protest where you hold up a sign, take a picture of yourself, and you post on social media with, I think there's 3 different hashtags. Again, all of that information online on our Facebook page and also through Pam as well. And then finally, resources here at Watershed have continued. The way that they've come in have just been so deeply encouraging. I know, given what the world is facing right now, as Watershed, as you have turned towards your community and said, this matters with my resources, the humbling measure of that experience as a staff, as leaders, as a community has been really profound. And so we continue to name a deep place of gratitude in that, but then also in the name of transparency and vulnerability, over the past couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, we've also seen a bit of a dip. And that's not to alarm anyone. That's just to say, I know for some of you, you've always told us, we want to know how things are going. And so if you have space for a one-time gift, or if you're wondering, how do I jump into this in a recurring fashion, there's ways to engage giving at Watershed, either through our Watershed app or on our website. And whatever gestures those of you who are calling this home would like to make, that's appreciated as well. I'm really excited again, one more time, about this conversation that we're having. And for all the dads that are listening, I'm glad you're here this morning. And we look forward to the next few minutes together. Thanks.
Good morning, Watershed. My name is Lauren Fletcher. I've been with Watershed just over 2 years. It is my joy, my privilege, and honor to speak with you today. As an African American male, I can tell you the importance and the value of a father in a child's life. are the gentle, firm energy that turns your children into diamonds. I have never met my father. However, today's words are words I would love to have shared with him. For every father, the words today are to remind you, embrace you, empower you, and acknowledge you. Let today's service wash over you, filling your lungs with pride while massaging your body with grace. Today and always, this is a sacred space for you. Embrace this role as just one of your blessings. Father, in solidarity, God bless.
So I think it was 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, you and I were on a phone call together. We were talking about Watershed. We were talking about all the stuff that's happening in the world and our community and how our community has the opportunity to step into some things. And then and that conversation kind of ended, and I remember you saying, hey, I've written this poem. It's to my dad, or it's in response to my experience with my dad over my lifetime, and would you just listen to this poem? And about 2 minutes into the poem, I couldn't even speak. It was so moving. It was so hitting me right where I was in that particular moment on that particular day. And I don't even think I gave you a choice. I said, that poem at some point has to be read here on a Sunday morning. And that's actually going to happen later on this morning. But then fast forward a couple of weeks later, when our design team, our teaching team was sitting around the table thinking about what this weekend needs to include, my mind went back to this poem. And I thought, what if we tried to have a conversation around what fatherhood could be, but we did that from the perspective of a dad, and we did that from the perspective of a son, which is you. You're playing that role this morning. And so that's what we're going to try to do today. And I think in order to help people kind of understand where we're coming from, could you take just a moment, talk about how you're showing up this morning, talk about the context from which you're going to be speaking today?
Yeah, so first way I'm showing up is nervous. Hello, Watershed community. But as we've had this conversation, as we've engaged this dialogue, there's been some really amazing things that I can't divorce the conversation from. And so my queerness being one of those things, my blackness, and then and then I forgot that was a live photo. And then the narrative that integrates with my father's narrative and that trajectory of how we've grown up. And so just for a little background, for the first 6 years of my life, my dad was incarcerated. And so we were separated, and that really put a strain on our relationship.
Sure.
To the point at times I would probably say, I remember at one point there being some tension and sort of this full-on rejection of my dad as my father, and want to bring that full circle around as we go through and flow through this conversation. And so I guess that's what I'm here in terms of there's grace and there's hope to be had in this conversation, and that's what I'm hoping to be able to sift out and bring into it.
Yeah. So I'm in my mid-50s almost, and I think when I think about my context, it's like words like transition pop up. I'm kind of in the in-between space of my children who are now transitioning into adulthood. They're 15, 18, and 20, soon to be 21. And then it's some photographs of me with my dad, who is in the winter season of his life. And so recognizing that I'm moving into a space where I will be helping my father transition, and then my kids are now transitioning into adulthood. And then on top of all of this, there's the way that my family is put together, the complexion and the complexity of my family, having 3 children from 3 different continents, India, Ethiopia, and Thailand. And then over the last 2 years, becoming way, way, way more informed and aware and awake to what it means for my children to live in black and brown bodies in this world, and what that means for me as a dad.
But that's disruptive.
No, not at all. No, I got it all figured out, man. Got it all figured out. But those are just like starting points, and there's more that I think we could probably say around those. But yeah, that's how we're showing up this morning. Yeah.
Perceptions of fatherhood. The father has a vital role in a child's life. Good fathers are a pillar in the family. They provide essential pieces in the overall healthy development of their children's emotional and physical needs. Fathers lay down the gentle and sometimes difficult rules and guidelines for the household, as well as those for when his children are not home. Daughters look to him for gentle, protective strength and a loving place to get advice and, if necessary, shed tears. The son looks to please him, make him proud, and will model many of his behaviors. The father holds a space where their children draw strength from 24 hours a day. For those who may be estranged from your children, maybe today could be a day to reach out, to take steps toward healing. Life deals a variety of obstacles for each father. If needed, let today be a day of grace for you.
try to breathe till it turns to muscle memory. I'm only steady on my knees. One day I'll stand on my own 2 feet, and I'll run the risk of being intimate with brokenness. Through this magnifying glass, I see 1,000 fingerprints. Oh, I ran the risk of being intimate with brokenness, and I was given a gift of hope and 1,000 fingerprints. On the surface says who I am, oh, who I am. Show me who I am and who I could be. Initiate the heart within me till it opens properly.
So that was beautiful, and you're trying to make me cry this morning, so.
That might happen a few times today,
just-
just for the
just-
record. Yeah, just for the record.
So, like I said, we want to kind of take a journey through this conversation, and with the reading that Lauren offered, that Blair just read so beautifully, in it, in the last line, it said, "Life deals a variety of obstacles. Let today be a day of grace for you." And we just wanted to take some time to talk about obstacles, because in my experience, as I sit and observe in reflection my relationship with my dad and the trials and tribulations that we've gone through, what I've begun to see is that there's sort of these overarching themes and systems even that reflect how we go into building relationships between like our kids and parents. And so I want to talk about specific things, but then also try to contextualize that into maybe some universal or some broader language.
Yeah.
So what came up out of our conversation in terms of those, when we talk about barriers?
Yeah, the particulars, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting because what I find myself doing as a dad when I have the thoughtfulness to do this, when I'm practicing some degree of mindfulness, I think things that create barriers or obstacles for me, and I think this is true of my own father. Like if I look back and observe what I think I remember about my dad's fatherhood in my life, in some ways it's not rocket science. It's like overcommitment, stress, the frenzied pace of life that doesn't even allow you or afford you the opportunity or the permission to observe your experience in fatherhood. So like this ongoing pressure to step into every moment of the day, and you don't even realize it's happening. I think for me, there's insecurity.
Preach.
Yeah, it's this. All right, if we're really honest, I don't know what I'm doing. Kind of thing. I'm making this up as I go and throwing mud against the wall and then perform like this performance of, see, look how well crafted and well groomed the whole experience appears. Especially if you follow fatherhood on Facebook or whatnot, and certainly that would include me. And then so like it's like stress and then insecurity, and then it just like if you bring it down the ladder of clarity one more rung, it's just you're terrified, you're afraid, and not being able to name that, not being able to wrestle that to the ground, watching something happen for your son or your daughter or your family, and feeling really under-equipped, under-resourced, not good enough.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah, I mean, and I got a chance in the break to look at some of the comments on Facebook, and Sean Buxenbowers had put a quote that I'm paraphrasing, that it's easier to build a strong child or a strong man than it is to rebuild a broken one. And I just thought that was so profound. And one of the things that I'm thinking about is that we can't heal a lot of these things until we're able to name it and have certain maybe context to understand these things in. And so I'm going to throw out a word. And for some people, I think this word can be really scary, and it can cause people to shut down. But try to be open with me. So I'm going to throw out patriarchy.
Yeah.
And I think that we have a context to understand patriarchy through, and oftentimes we hear that word and we're like, we shrink back. But I think that feminist theories, womanist theorists have done a really good job at creating some integrative language and understandings, conceptual understandings, that how we understand patriarchy today is as this system in which men have traditionally used to hold power over women. And it doesn't just affect women negatively, but it affects men negatively too, because it takes us out of authenticity.
Yeah.
But then to provide more context to it, there's 3 areas that patriarchy tends to stretch into. First area being social. And so when we think about social, think about the family. And that's really where so much of this starts, is at the family unit and how we structure our families, right? So our relationship towards each other, how we organize ourselves in relation to each other. This would be some of the social aspects of patriarchy. When we talk about the political, and we're really experiencing that now with protest, we're seeing how consolidating power and holding on to power, and even though the focus in so many ways is racism, there's an undergirding of cisgendered male heteropatriarchy upholding these things to consolidate power. But think about politics in terms of how we organize ourselves in relationship to power. Principles and powers and principles, church and state, and then the big one is economics. So how we are able to provide the resources that we have. And it just brings to my mind that scripture at Ephesians 6:12, where it talks about that our wrestling's not with flesh and blood, but with powers and principalities. And I feel like sometimes these barriers, as they show up as stress, as they show up as inadequacies, as they show up as insecurities, it feels like we're wrestling with our own flesh and blood, and to a degree we are. But I think that we can find grace when we're able to see that we're also wrestling against systems that we're existing in.
Yeah, and so you bring up a great point, and to kind of piggyback off of that. Like when you make a statement and you include Paul's words in there, I remember when I was a kid, there would be this sort of mythologizing that statement as though there's like this angelic evil being that seeks to destroy us. And it's really this invisible type ideology, structure. So you're not just a dad who is personally having experiences, in my case, with insecurity, fear, and stress. You're having that in the context of the larger thing that's going on in the world, in your neighborhood, in your family. I know that like the social part of that, in terms of the way that our family is organized, like we're a work in progress right now. We don't, I think we're just now recognizing how that exists, and to unlearn that is really hard, to try to course correct or reconfigure how you function as a family. That's just really, it's really tough the farther you are into it. So my kids are almost adults, and now we're having this conversation. But talk about how that was experienced in your family growing up, between you and your dad, and because I know that in terms of the patriarchy, the economic, the social, and the political, looking back, there are very specific ways that you can identify now.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I mentioned earlier, for the first 6 years of my life, my dad was incarcerated. It was for low-level nonviolent drug offense. And I think those early years are so formative into a person's life, and then also you're getting your belief systems, and so absent all that, here I was with this sort of stranger, and then all of a sudden when I turned 6, he comes home and he tries to fill into this father role, and I'm like, whoa, who are you? All right, and so I can see that from my perspective. What I didn't see is how demoralizing that reaction was from his perspective. And when we talk about barriers, sometimes barriers, we can step into barriers on our own, and sometimes they're imposed on ourselves. And so in some ways, when we look at, we've been having lots of conversations about racial injustice here within the community lately. We've been having conversations about intersectionality in the work of Kimberly Crenshaw, if you have time to look her up and really understand what that means, about how different aspects of marginalization begin to stack on top of each other and increase the navigation through the lenses of oppression. But when we think about social, like you could see instead, my dad try to fit back into this social role of what society and the church had told him. This is what it is to be a man. This is what it is to, get control of your family, to worship together, to do all these things together. And me growing up Jehovah's Witness, and he was a National Baptist from the black church kind of things. And so not only that, I was missing out on this really rich aspect of my heritage that he was trying to teach that I had absolutely no context for because our pathways were so divergent. And it was rooted in this right-wrong ideology. And so then when we take the political or the church and state, that actually affected the economic. Because what happens when a person's incarcerated? They can't. My dad had a job, but that job didn't pay enough because what if I want to send my kid to college, right? Or what? And so we start thinking about how do I fit my children into these constructs so that they can thrive, so that they can survive. And I think sometimes trying to fit into something that is unnatural, that is sort of separate from the natural inherent goodness that we are, we begin to spiral down, feel insignificant, and then we root into what is that thing trying to consolidate and hold on to power. And that then becomes and looks very violent and abusive in a lot of instances.
So what I hear you saying in all of that, and I think this is relevant for every dad and every son, is there are barriers that might appear to be obvious, but they might be symptoms to a deeper problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know Pete Rollins was here, I think week 4 or something, and I've loved his thinking around if you're in some sort of addictive situation, it's real easy to vilify like the alcohol or the drugs, and you have a drinking problem. No. That's a symptom to the deeper problem. Yeah. And so part of what I think is a first step in envisioning a new type of fatherhood is to try to locate what are the barriers and then dig beneath the surface and saying what are the deeper places that these barriers are rooted in. And then you can't change what you can't see. So once you begin to see, it's possible that hope becomes possible.
Yeah.
Today is yours. Of the 365 days you hold space for your family, let today embrace you with gratitude. Let every look from your children be a reflection of the love you have given. Find joy in each inch as you gaze upon them from head to toe. Look at the beautiful work in progress that is still becoming. Know that when you're not there, you are there. They carry you with them and hold them close, even though they are not near. Know that you're like the air and the sun, providing necessary elements constantly impacting their lives. It has recently occurred to me how right our Native American brothers and sisters were in thanking the earth for all the gifts it provides. Similarly, you provide so many of their needs. Today, they, the community, the world, says thank you. Take a moment today. Gaze at your reflection in the mirror and see and know how important you are. Acknowledge yourself and walk into the world with a little more pride. Thank your Father, whether he is here or in spirit. Reflect on those things he gave you and say thank you. This also holds true for father-like mentors and father figures. While your work is endless and sometimes thankless, it is necessary. So let the community embrace you and thank you. And thank you again. And once again, thank you.
How you doing?
I'm hanging in there. Wow. It's interesting how just a little bit of gratitude goes a long way. And again, when you start to be aware of those barriers, to have someone acknowledge, hey, can we all just say this isn't easy? At least for me, that's like a step towards hope in all of this. And almost it's empowering because you, as a dad, every dad needs some voice in their life that says, I believe in you. You can do this, and it's going to be okay. And I know when those types of voices have been in my life, it's been like a balm over my soul. Where do we go from here? Like, what does hope begin to look like? What does it look like to create something new as dads from a son's perspective? What are some of the themes that, as we've been talking over the last, it seems like a solid month now, you and I. Can we talk about some of the epiphanies or themes that have emerged?
Yeah. And I would say there's probably even been even longer than that. We started this conversation a few months ago, but these are sort of been some ruminations.
Yeah.
But I think three things came up in our conversation that I feel like is the pathway into grace, into a new way of being and existing. Yeah. And the first thing that I think is so important when we come to this question of what could fatherhood be like? What is a good father? I think the first step is vulnerability.
Yes. Yeah.
There's that fear of being exposed, that somehow we come up with this child and we're all of a sudden supposed to be experts, and that there's this science that's prescriptive, and then you take a breath and you're like, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing.
Right? Yeah, and so to your point, I think when you can somehow be really transparent about the thing that is really hard, and then if you can, at appropriate, age-appropriate ways, be vulnerable about that with your kids, then all of a sudden they start to see you as something other than the provider or the protector. They see your humanity in all of that. I think part of why the barriers thing for me has been really damaging has been the need for control when those barriers are there. If I don't acknowledge what the barrier is, then I can't be vulnerable. I can't. It's the word I'm searching for here. Punitive. That's the word. Like without vulnerability, I tend to click into cause and effect, punishment as the way.
Yeah.
Whether that's, all right, you have made a mistake, son or daughter, therefore here's a consequence, and I'm teaching you to live within the boundaries of the world.
You go back into that space of trying to get control.
Control, right, right. And so there's this dance between, I have to make sure my kids don't touch the hot stove, and at the same time, continue to stay connected. And so vulnerability is a way of staying in tune with yourself so that you're showing who you really are to your children. And then from there, the connection allows you, and again, when I've somehow fallen into this or stepped into it, it feels like you don't have to worry about the boundaries as much. The kid that you're talking to, the child, the son, the daughter, there's a degree of trust that is developed there so that they want the same thing that you are trying to show them is important.
Yeah. I think my dad was incredibly vulnerable about those struggles that he was going through, and it took time. It wasn't an immediate thing, and I think that sometimes as children, we're very much we're needing that affection now in the way that we think that we need it, and it's really hard sometimes to see our parents' humanity because they should know better. But I think that my dad stepping into this vulnerability really helped. And I will say that the more vulnerable he was, the more he exposed himself to the shame that was within him. And I think that sometimes opening up, that shame gets really loud because it's asking us to listen to it, and we want to shut it down, but we just hold the course. And I think that the next thing, being flexible, will help with that.
Yeah, well, yeah, because at any given moment, you might have to, just jettison everything you thought was the plan and, course correct, change direction, function in a way that you weren't prepared to function or hadn't thought to function in. So for me, I think flexibility has been when, again, in the name of transparency, there was a particular parenting philosophy. We had a parenting philosophy that was rooted in...
Tied up into a science.
Well, yeah, right. And this was biblical. So you had the Bible supports this.
And if you're not listening to me, children, be obedient with your parents.
Well, so you say that word obedient, everything was about obedience. It was, you are not the center of the universe, God is the center of the universe, which really means I'm going to tell you what God thinks, as though somehow I have the ability to do that. And so everything was about, when I ask you to do something, you do it the first time, because I'm trying to teach you how to have an obedient relationship with God. Nothing was like being thought through in terms of intimacy with God. It was this authoritative, we're back to the patriarchy now, the patriarchal notion of this male dominant, powerful figure in the world or in the universe. How did I get there from flexibility? I can't remember.
Well, I think because this being that rigid, and we're taught this one way to get control or this obedience, we miss out on the humanity of the situation that we're involved in. We're not bendable. This flexibility denotes this bendability, this movement through. But I think also to have that movement, you have to be present. And so that last point is present over perfection. We strive so hard, I think, to be perfect parents that we often miss what it is to be a present parent. And present in this day and age, under systems, powers, and principalities, is quite difficult.
So you have been really helpful for me in this conversation over the last, 2 or 3 months or whatever it's been, in describing at your season of life, in your season of life, of now going back and being able to locate when your dad was stepping into things, and because of your age or your developmental spot in your evolutionary process, maybe you couldn't see it then, but now you can.
Yeah.
And so you've watched these three things be true of your dad when maybe 20 years ago you would have said, no, that's not true.
No context. It was all in the realm of because he didn't have the context to give me love in the way that I received it, then he must not love me. And I think that's we expect this perfection, and then we impose that on ourselves. And what's really happening is that I feel like, for me, in our case, we're trying to fit into constructs that aren't natural, that say, you need to change this, you need to be this way, or else you are not good, when we already have the assurance that you are good.
Yeah, that's how we started this morning.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. And Shauna Niequist in Present Over Perfect, she says that present is living with your feet firmly grounded in reality. Pale and uncertain as it may seem, present is choosing to believe that your own life is worth investing deeply in, instead of waiting for some rare miracle or fairy tale. Present means we understand that we are here and now, that the here and now is sacred, sacramental, threaded through with divinity, even in its plainness, especially in its plainness.
Yeah.
So in a room full of screaming children, in a room full of all the anxieties and the shame and the normalcy, and it feels like we're failing, I think that God is in those moments, waiting for us to recognize that presence in there to move us through it. To say that you don't have to have this perfect, just be. What do you need in this moment? What do they need in this moment? And she goes on to say that many of us consider our soul's necessary collateral damage to get done the things we feel we simply had to get done because of other people's expectations, because we want to be known as highly capable, because we're trying to outrun an inner emptiness. And for a while, we don't even realize the compromise we've made. We're on autopilot, chugging through the day on fear and caffeine, checking things off the list, falling into bed without even a real thought or feeling or connection all day long, just a sense of having made it through.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think when you talk about, when I hear you say autopilot, I'm on autopilot when I am angry, afraid, or tired. I am not on autopilot when I can detach and make the distinction between being a person who is identifying themselves as those things versus a human being who is having an experience with those things. And I think when I'm present, then I can show up in a moment with my kids or my family or anyone for that matter and go, all right, I need to be aware that I am experiencing fear, doubt, uncertainty, joy, hope. I'm a person having this experience, and I need to make sure that I hold that in one hand so that I can sit in a moment and really hear what that person is trying to say and really help me understand why I might be having those reactions emotionally to a moment. That is so hard.
Yeah.
That is so, and
it's not
it
what
feels
society
rare.
gives us space for.
I'm
either.
sorry?
It's not what society gives us space to do either.
And we don't give ourselves that space too.
No.
I mean, more often than not, perfect is what runs the machine for me. Perfect obedience, perfect control, perfect assertion of will. I have a very clear idea of how you, Jody, Sully, Mez, Amazi, I have a very perfect idea of where you need to be 10 minutes from now or 2 years from now.
Yeah.
And so if I'm not careful, it's all about me instead of creating the space where we can all see each other and something new is born out of that.
Yeah. And I want to be clear, like I know we focus so much on the male aspect of it, and then
Yes.
there's a whole non-binary aspect to this, and,
Right.
and what that looks like in fatherhood, and just places that this isn't the end of a conversation like this. This is just the beginning,
Yeah.
because through it all, the thing that I am clear is that fatherhood means also raising our hands to say, I need help,
Yeah.
and I need to walk along through this in community. It's not a science. Fatherhood is an art.
And our sisters here have done so much better at going, what does it mean for us to circle up and go, how do we do this? This is much harder. This is my personal, it's much harder for me as a man because of the system that I've been raised in to go, yeah, I need that.
Yeah.
And again, Tuesday night, we're going to be coming together. And I hope you'll be there. If you're a dad, if you're an adult son, you can sign up for it in the link. Is there any closing type things that you think, I think there's this one thing or these two things that are left to be said in this space this morning?
Yeah. When I think as fathers and as children, but specifically to fathers, that when you see your inherent goodness, that gives those who love you, those who you are charged to care for, whether it is actual fatherhood, adopted fatherhood, whatever the case is, it gives you that space to see them. It gives you that space to step into vulnerability and flexibility and being present over perfect. It gives you the space to say that I love you no matter what, even if you are queer, and I accept you.
Yeah.
It gives us the space to see our violent reactions and how it makes our daughters or wives shrink smaller. It gives us space to begin to change those things that need to be changed so that we not just recognize our inherent goodness, but we live it out in practice.
So here's how we want to end this morning. Thank you for that. We want to end kind of in two ways. We want to take just a moment of silence for those fathers who maybe are not with us right now. Maybe they have been lost. Maybe they are fathers that are missed or unable to be present in a way that in a way that we would long for them to be present. So we want to take a moment of silence. And then also, you have this poem. And this poem, I think, I'll let you explain it, but to be able to end in a space where we can acknowledge the barriers, speak towards the hope, and then empower our community of fathers. I think that's how we want to end this morning.
Amen.
Amen. So would you join us for the next several seconds at least in holding some silence, holding some space for our dads.
So, Ava DuVernay, if you've watched this Netflix series, When They See Us, she told this in this series, this moving stories about 5 black youth who were accused, abused, mistreated, lost years of their lives at the hands of the criminal justice system. And we just talked about political and imposed barriers. And I wrote this for my dad. He turned 76 this year. And I was just sort of in reflection about time missed, time gained, where our relationship is now. And realizing this, I hope that the words meet you in where your fatherhood is, and that you can see yourself in it, and that you know that your children will grow up to see you in it, that we're not perfect humans. That's something to be grateful for. So in thinking about that, and as we go through this, you'll see some pictures scroll through, and I hope that meets you in a moment of reflection. So today that has me asking, when they see us, will they actually see us? When they see you, will they actually see you? Will they see the effects of them taking you away from me when I was just becoming familiar with who you were and what you could bring to my life? Will they see the tears you cried that you kept from me when you came home to a son that you didn't know? Will they see the bottle you picked up to drink down the pain of past mistake and regret? Will they see the experiments that sowed distrust in a system that probably hindered us from seeking the help we needed to heal, to grow? Will they see the damage that comes from assimilation, that builds walls where we fight as family to hold on to identity, holding on for history not to be erased, that refuses to be whitewashed? Will they see that we are truth seekers and truth tellers? Will they see that we are not the things that we did on our worst days? Will they see the disproportionate response of passion in which they seek to carry out a thing called retribution, disguised as justice? Will they see the man that they produce that's the resultant of a false narrative of love? Will they see the man they produce obsessed with dominion, respect, power, and image? Will they see the man behind the facade who really only cares about love and those around him thriving? Will they see the man whose body they sent to kill innocent lives? Will they see the man whose bones are more like metal these days than calcium? Will they see the scars on a broken body, visible and invisible? Will they see their part in creating a man flawed, broken, mistake-bound, with all odds against him? Will they see the man whose narrative and experience was me against the world? Will they feel that weight? Will they see the man in recovery, not just from addiction, but from a culture he could never live up to, never thrive in, or be fully authentic? Will they see the man that embodies love? Will they see the man that maintains the posture of repentance? Will they see the man that gives and helps really in search for the love within? When they see you, will they see you as criminal or saint? When they see you, will they see themselves? Will they see the paradox that it is to be human? Will they see the burden that it is to be black? Will they see what I see? A man who is fully divine, light and dark, sinner and saint, creator and destroyer, angel and demon, spirit and flesh, human and divine. When they see you, will the romantics of love and humanity fall away? Will the binary be broken? Will they see the holistic man, the man who struggles much and loves so fiercely and deeply, the man who strives for his best even at his worst? Will they see the man that engaged in the holy dance of creation and pleasure that brought you to me? Will they see that man? When they see us, will they see us? When they see you, will they see you? God, I hope they do. So on this Father's Day, may you be well, may you be blessed, and may you have immeasurable, expansive, immense grace for yourself. May you be present, because it's okay not to be perfect. Love you.